Hi, welcome to another episode of Hometown History. I'm Jamie.
And I'm Dami.
And this episode is 5.6, Almshouse, Prisons, Orphanages, York County's Commitment to Community Care in the 1800s. We are outside of the Chestnut Street Prison in downtown York, and you can drive by this and see this on your own. And we'll be sure to talk about this about halfway through the episode.
Yeah, so to kick it off, we've got 3 stops for tonight. So we're going to start at York's Almshouse, including the nearby hospital. Then we're going to cover our jails and our prisons. And our last stop includes a quick dive into the Children's Home of York, our first orphanage.
We've got 3 takeaways for this lesson. One is that social institutions like orphanages and poorhouses and even prisons take a fractured community and they bring order out of some chaos and they help the community. Second is that the 1800s in York County saw the rise of governmental and private citizens taking a higher level of action for more centralized care. It was so disparate and all over the place, but now we're going to see some level of organization. And then, however, though, finally, for number 3, today we're actually seeing a push away from large institutions. The current trend is to keep individuals at home with their family and small group homes. And I took your number 3.
No, that's okay. I was just going to say, if you want to learn more about something like that, the Children's Home of York episode that we did is a great example.
A little bit about us is I'm a teacher. I used to be a high school history teacher, so this is a continuation of my love of history. But my day job is I direct a nonprofit called the York County Safety Collab, and I do a lot of writing, whether that's with Wondering in York blog, or Jim McClure and I run a website called Witness in York.
Yeah, and I work for the Third Circuit Court of Appeals as a branch librarian, and in my spare time I'm running Preserving the History of Newburytown and reenacting with the 87th PA Company C Civil War reenactors.
And right now you've been really busy.
Very busy. Good busy, though.
Yeah. Okay, so we've all heard of poorhouses, and there was one erected here in York County in 1805, and it was called the York County Almshouse. It was a 150-acre piece of land, originally the Elm Spring Farm, and it provided acreage that allowed them to build a community poorhouse. Otherwise, these people would be left homeless. They would have nowhere else to go. So I think that was pretty cool that York County came together in the beginning of the 1800s.
Absolutely.
Town leaders at the time threw around the idea of building it at the Commons in York County, which would have been Penn Park, but we know that that's not where they ended up building it. It is up here in the northwest side of York City.
Yeah, so they built it on land that would later become the Alexander D. Good School. And a nearby waterway is called Poorhouse Run, so that reminds us of this history. And Jim pointed that out to me on my little tour of this area when I first got here. And the building had 3 floors with an attic and a basement, and improvements over the years meant that they ended up having a kitchen, a dining area, offices for the staff, and they even had sitting rooms.
Yeah, they really began to improve. Started out small, and they grew it and grew it. So this initiative was possibly the first of many county-wide programs that served the needy through tax dollars. And Jim McClure wrote this quote that I thought that we could quote. He said, "This public complex on a former farm suggests a growing view that government should help feed and care for indigent people, supplementing religious congregations and provide individuals in such charity." So this was an original effort that really took the homeless, the abandoned, the mentally ill throughout our county and brought them together under one roof.
It's a good quote from Jim.
Yeah.
So there was 200 rooms with walls that were 13 inches thick, so not like the buildings you see today, and each had 4 inches of sand between the flooring. And their best attempt at soundproofing this place had appeared chaotic at times. I mean, I can't imagine living in a place that had 4 inches of sand under the floor, but you got to do what you got to do. And by the 1870s, it had gas and water, and the rooms added greater privacy with a certain degree of self-respect and every human being craves. And that was written in 1878 York Gazette, and that's an article that we found from June Burke Lloyd.
Yes, and there is a picture, of course, a painting of our favorite Lewis Miller. We're fangirls of Lewis Miller.
We really are. We're his biggest fans in 2025.
So remember, let me go back for a second here. Remember that the children's home, which is in our other episode that we're going to get to in a second, wasn't built until 1867. So what happened to the kids before we had our first orphanage?
Right.
Well, the almshouse did take some of those children in, but if they didn't have a mental illness or if they didn't have a physical disability, they had to leave within 60 days. Just so sad, right?
It
like
is.
Your kid, like, where are you going to go?
It is sad, but it does make sense because you're trying to help the most most needy.
Yep.
And if you're physically able, you know, unfortunately you got bumped to the side.
Yep, I hear you. So it's kind of appalling to think about it today, but a lot of these children were like farmed out. They were apprenticed, they were sent out as indentured servants, and they didn't have any supervision. And just to be clear, places like Choi today they have apprenticeships, but it's very supervised with lots of like mandated reporting, and they check on everything.
Child labor laws are in effect.
Yes, thank you. I recently saw a meme that was like, the children yearn for the mines. And I think about like my son loving to play in the dirt.
Otto would though. Otto would be like, send me down with the canary.
Luke's like, Otto's yearning for the mines and playing in the dirt.
He's yearning for the excavator.
He does. But these kids though, if they weren't able to stay then in the poorhouse, they really had to rely on adults that just took them in from goodwill. There was no organization, there was no structure.
The almshouse was also a place for people labeled indigent, vagrants, or insane. But for those mentally or physically ill, they went to the brick hospital built next door, and that was in 1828. And a woman named Dorothea Dix visited in 1844, and I'm sure you all know who that is, a social reformer. She wanted to persuade York Countyans that those with mental illness would be better served at a state hospital.
Yes, yep, a little bit more supervision. So generally, she reported that both the almshouse and the hospital were in good order in York County. But during her tour, she reported that she saw 101 men, women, and children, 25 of which she described as insane or idiots, which those were her words, and at the time that was kind of common in like lexicon, like that would have been common language.
That's the appropriate language for the time.
Yeah, it definitely has changed now today. The latter, though, the ones that were considered insane or idiots, were very much less cared for. They were sequestered in the basement of the hospital. They were kept in rooms that were about 14 by 10 feet. Some of them were in chains or hobbles, which are like handcuffs. A lot of them were suffering from mental illness, then were transferred to the Harrisburg State Hospital, which operated into 2006. But it kind of makes me sad that we like chained up. I mean, they didn't have another option, but like we had chained up mentally ill people here in York County. Like it's not just in the horror movies that you see online. Like we did have that right here.
Thank goodness times have changed.
Thank goodness.
And attitudes toward poverty have also changed over time, thank goodness. And we can break these feelings into 3 different categories. So individual explanations are personal choices or character traits. Fatalistic explanations are uncontrollable bad luck or accident. And structural explanations are societal norms, laws, and systems.
Back then, it was just individual traits. It was, if you were poor, it was 100% your fault. Whereas today, we have, I think, a nice blend of personal responsibility, but then also, like, sometimes there's systems that make it really challenging.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Residents of the poorhouse were called inmates, and in 1872, let me go back here for a second, the almshouse went through another transition. It actually moved from the east to now today, here you go, Pleasant Acres Nursing and Rehabilitation Center, and it's also privately owned.
Interesting.
This is no longer a governmental institution. This is a private entity.
So we can't name them all, but we have, oh, I'm sorry, I skipped ahead. Sorry. So we don't have an almshouse today is what I was supposed to say, but we have the same diagnoses as schizophrenia, dementia, Down syndrome, autism, and depression that they would have had back in the day. So what types of support are out there for people, you know, that are struggling with their mental health? So thankfully there's NAMI, which stands for National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI, and they offer peer-to-peer support, educational courses for family, and they train community members.
And so here are just a sample of them. Like Dami said, we've got NAMI, we got the ARC in the top right-hand corner. They serve people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. In the center, that is David Nutt. I just had the fortune, I love downtown, there's just like a gas-powered bike that just went by.
We're live!
And David Nutt is a therapist. He also has autism himself, and he and his partner and his great board formed a nonprofit that supports people who have autism through gaming. So it's like therapy through gaming.
Cool.
Dude is so impressive. Like I'm so impressed with this group. So it just shows you that there are a lot of supports and community-based programs that are in our community today.
Very important.
Yep.
So the goal isn't to hospitalize people if they don't need it. It's community-based care that reduces barriers to success by keeping our sons, daughters, fathers, and mothers home.
Very good. Thank
so,
you, Tommy.
Super important. And that leads us to our first jail. And look, another painting
Lewis
by Lewis Miller. So before the children's home and before the almshouse and before the hospital, we had another social institution, and that was the jail. So dating back to 1750s, the jail went up just south of York Center Square on the corner of South Georgia and East King Street, and it was 2 stories tall, and actually the second one was built by the county. And the purpose for that was to reduce the lawlessness west of the Susquehanna River. The Wild West.
Wild. We were the Wild West. During the Revolutionary War, we detained British prisoners of war in our jails. So they were at Camp Security, but they were also incarcerated in the downtown jail at the time. They were unhappy with their living conditions, and they actually wrote a note to Continental Congress, who was staying in York at the time, and they described, I have the quote there if you want to read it, "Miseries had been aggravated by a most criminal imprisonment in a loathsome jail, infected with a contagious fever and polluted with noisome smells through every part." I love that writing.
Yuck.
This is before like the thesauruses.
Really paints an image for you.
Right.
So officials investigated the complaint, and they reported that 7 POWs shared 2 airy rooms and a 180 by 154 foot exercise yard. Prison officials regularly swept the yard and kept it relatively clean, so the POWs even had 3 servants who tended to them.
Tommy, I just have to show everyone the groundhog.
Wait.
We have a friend. Do you see it climbing up over the hill?
It's just a baby.
Yeah, it's just a baby groundhog.
I'll take you home
That's
with
the
me.
best audience member I think we've ever had.
Oh, he's climbing a tree.
That's cool.
Oh no.
So here we have an example of one of the guys who repeatedly complained, and his name was Dr. John Conley. He reported that he was near death from the confinement, and a physician went and checked it out. They did an investigation, and they found that his illness was of a Hippocratic nature. Yep. No, I'm sorry, not Hippocratic. Hypochondriac, very different, hypochondriac nature. Their board reported that prisoners should actually be more closely watched because their excessive freedoms would lead to them escaping. And so Dr. Conley's complaint backfired, and they tightened up their restrictions.
Wow.
Sorry, Dr. Conley.
Ruh-roh. The prison ended up moving to join the almshouse across from Poorhouse Run, and the original prison was built in the mid-50s but replaced the current cell block that you see today in 1906. And the original prison was demolished, but here you can catch a glimpse of it in the back left of this photograph. And the photo also shows you the original facade, and it's really castle-like for, you know, what it is supposed
cool.
to be. Yeah.
I'm not sure, like, looking at that, like, picture and then, like, looking at what's behind us, I'm not sure which one I like more. Kind of like going behind us.
I don't know. I'm going to go with the castle.
Are you? You like the castle?
I do.
So you can see that this abandoned hulk of a structure today that is on Chestnut Street, it is actually listed as one of York County's most endangered sites because no one really seems to be able to find an adaptive reuse for it.
Right.
So if you are an investor and if you are looking, I think this would be a great site for you to acquire. I don't even know if it's for sale, but we can make some phone calls and try to make it happen.
Wouldn't be the first time someone tried to buy something that wasn't for sale.
That's true. The Chestnut Street Prison served as our county's lockup up until the 1970s, and then our prisoners were then moved to the current location of York County Prison that's over in Spring-Asbury Township. This wasn't, though, the only place for us to stage lawbreakers in the county. Lockups were also all around the county to make it easier, but they would have been, because this was a world like before automobiles, easier transportation, but there would have been lesser crimes like public drunkenness and that kind of thing. The serious offenses would still have been sent.
What a difference, though.
Yeah, that's a great point.
That's huge.
You want to guess how many inmates on a daily basis are at York County Prison?
Oh gosh, I don't even know. I can't even come up with a number. Lot.
1,060 on average.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah.
That is a lot.
You want to guess how many $1 million it takes to run the York County Prison?
More than I'll ever make in my whole life.
$80 million. 80 million.
It's a
yeah.
business. Holy
Yes.
moly.
But it's very trauma informed today, and we're actually going to get into that.
So one was in the basement, the ground basement, the marketplace in the square, and there was also a jail in Seven Valleys, a lockup, and then there was another one in Red Lion, and then there's another one in Dover. We also had a little one in Lewisberry.
Oh, did you?
I don't know if you know that.
I did
yeah.
not know. Is it still there? Can you see it?
No, the little plot of land is there, and they used to put the tanker truck for the fire department there, and then they had to take it out when they had a prisoner. Because they didn't have like a garage big enough for it.
It's a good use of space if no one's using it, which is cool.
I know. So prisons are a place to go when people break the law, usually. But even today, people are concerned about crime. So if you're concerned about crime, what concerns you most? I'm pretty interested to hear people's responses in the comment section.
I'm genuinely interested too, because this is part of what I do for my day job, is perceptions of public safety. So I am interested. If you're concerned about crime, what concerns you the most? And so now let's get into York's first orphanage.
So if you'll remember 2 episodes ago, all the way back in March, we filmed an episode on the Children's Home of York, which we mentioned earlier in the episode, and Isabella and Samuel Small were 2 locals, and they were disturbed by the loss of life during the Civil War. And so they did something about it. They met with 70 other people in 1864, and they established our very first orphanage.
Its purpose was to educate and provide asylum for all poor white children or half orphans under the age of 12. Destitute children were admitted under circumstances such as vagrancy, exposure, neglect, or abandonment. An initial roll call of children counted 19 girls and 17 boys.
And the orphanage continued to grow. In 1929, a 2-year-old named Ara Marguerite Starner Arnold was taken in, and Ara described the rise and fall of hopes of adoption when families would come to the children's home to look over us, she said. And she pointed out without an ounce of self-pity that younger children were usually chosen over the older kids.
So sad.
And I think, unfortunately, that happens today as well. But despite her challenges, Ara described the home as a loving and a positive environment. And you can go watch the full episode about the Children's Home of York on our YouTube channel. So again, we filmed that back in March, but it's definitely worth the watch.
Absolutely. So the children's home and then the almshouse and the hospital and the prison were all built in the same general area. During that time, as Jim McClure points out, York was still a developing town. These buildings were laid on the edge of civilization with these green spaces on the sides of them and then houses on the other. And I want to, of course, quote him again because I just think this is fantastic. He said that these social institutions, their purpose of housing orphans, criminals, and poor did not demand or perhaps in some minds deserve desirable real estate in New York's 19th century downtown. So they're pushed to the outskirts on the fringes. But today, this is definitely not the fringes at all. This is very much like downtown
in the
New
very
York
middle.
City.
You can hear all the cars going by.
And all the people.
And I was going to say, someone on a bike passed us. Another social institution that we don't really think of as charity, but was very much built by philanthropists wanting to help York County, was schools. So just like the Children's Home, the Smalls founded the York Collegiate Institution back in 1873, and that was a forerunner of York College. And this building, formerly at College and Duke Streets, ended up burning down. But another Dempwolf design building went up in its place in the 1880s, and then that building was demolished in the early 1960s after York College moved to its current location.
Isn't that beautiful?
That's amazing.
Isn't that beautiful?
It reminds me of the Cathedral of Learning in Pittsburgh.
Okay. Yes.
Very Hogwarts.
Yes. I mean, it's so gorgeous. Yep. So even though we are north of the Mason-Dixon line, New York also wasn't exempt for systematic racism. According to the 1870 census, there were approximately 1,233 African Americans living in York County at the time. And unfortunately, from our history, our schools were also segregated. And that's why we have people like this, James Smallwood, who would have taught others in schools to educate Black children.
Isabel Small, the founder of the Children's Home of York, must have been one heck of a lady, because she also helped with the Ladies' Aid Society to support a training camp for Union soldiers and the military hospital that was set up at Penn Park to help the injured or sick soldiers. And she was a pioneer of her time, but she couldn't even vote, which is really sad.
It is.
I wish she would have been around long enough to see women be able to vote and get all their rights.
Yeah, we would have been friends, I think.
I think so.
What would life would have been like then before these social institutions? We alluded to them earlier, but sometimes they frankly cease to exist. And if there was a service, it was usually delivered by a church or some benevolent individual or a family that wanted to help out. So religious congregations played a major role, and they still play a major role in providing services to those in need. But like we said, one of the takeaways today is the 1800s saw a rise in centralized care, more of the government stepping up, a county-based system, so it wasn't so much pressure on the religious communities.
And we don't think about this a lot today, but death was also an obstacle and a challenge for the poor and the destitute. The York City Cemetery functioned as a potter's field, a place for those who otherwise couldn't afford a burial. Both white and black were allowed to be buried there, and Lebanon Cemetery also took in African Americans during a time of segregation. And I mean, I know this from my father passing away about 3 years ago. It's very expensive to bury someone. Not even to buy, like a fancy casket or have anything special. It's expensive. Burial is expensive even today.
And it's hard to talk about your mortality.
It is,
to think about.
People don't like to plan for it, but...
Okay, I have a question for you.
Yes.
I just asked my husband this and my family.
Yeah.
All right. when I was gonna say if you die, when you die, you know how you can do in lieu of flowers.
Yeah.
Where are you gonna send money to?
Uh-huh.
What nonprofit or entity?
The Redland Library.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's who we sent it to for my dad. I think that was the first time the Redland Library was put in an obituary.
So it is documented. Dami wants money sent to the Redland Library if and when she dies in 150
yeah, I was
years.
going to say, I'm not planning on it anytime soon, so don't get any ideas. But when the time comes, when I'm not immortal anymore.
Actually, me and my family tell me. I was like,
oh, really?
Yes, and I was surprised by the answers.
Where are you giving to your own nonprofit?
I know. Well, actually, it's funny you said that because I my own
or
nonprofit.
Or will the nonprofit cease to exist once you do?
You know, I really love the environment. I think I would do either the Farm and Natural Lands Trust or the Lower Susquehanna River Keepers. Yeah, I mean, those are other social institutions, right?
Worthy causes.
So back to our program. In the 1960s and 70s, we're going to see another change, transformation. So just like the 1860s, 100 years later, we're going to see other reforms. And this is a large part thanks to the Civil Rights Movement and LBJ's Great Society. It made us take a second look at our social institutions. So interestingly, though, Jim just did an article on this. He found that York County had actually already begun looking inward in the 1950s, so before the Great Society and Civil Rights Movement. For example, in the 1950s, Jim Crow segregations in schools ended. The Boys Club pool reopened after being shut down over racism. That would be a cool story if we did that one,
would be
actually.
A cool story. Comment if you want us to cover that story.
Yeah. The YM and the YW started accepting minorities. The Yorktown Hotel, formerly that used to ban black people as guests, made then the Green Book appearance, saying that it was a safe place for African American travelers. So it's kind of cool that York County was taking time. And also, what I like about Dami and Jim and I is that we kind of call out the bad stuff of history.
We do.
We're not like, York County was amazing all the time. Like, no, like, we're telling you that it wasn't great, but in the 1950s, we saw a lot of steps forward. So also, when we look at then the institutions that we're covering tonight, this is when we looked at the emotional neglect and developmental delays caused by hospitalization in orphanages and mental institutions and looked for other opportunities.
Ron Bunce is the president and CEO of the Children's Home of York today, and he was able to give us some insights, and you can read more about that on Witnessing York or on our extra episode. So you can go to Witnessing York or you can go to our YouTube page for that. But he said that traditional orphanages were replaced by foster care and small group homes, and Ron told us that research into childhood development stressed the importance of stable, trusting relationships and family-like environments. So you're getting away from those like hospitalized, sterile spaces, and you're getting more into a home
feeling, yeah,
yes.
Absolutely. The prison also went through some mega changes. They have trauma-informed care as a top priority. and in a recent tour that I was able to go on, I witnessed a yoga session with inmates, brightly colored murals. So don't get me wrong, it is still a place for punishment and to remove threats, but the idea is to then train and educate and rehabilitate. Exactly, to reduce recidivism, because we don't want people to continue to go back to prison.
And asylums have been largely decommissioned in York County. We still have residential treatment centers such as Wellspan Philhaven or the Youth Development Center, but our philosophy and practices have switched from ushering neurodivergent people into the margins of society. Instead, we include people with autism and Alzheimer's and anxiety, and we include them as much as possible today and sort of try and adapt and help them adapt to the environment as well.
So, finalizing now our takeaways again, the things that we want you to remember about this. One is that social institutions like orphanages and poorhouses and even prisons took a fractured community and melded us back together by providing some level of order in this chaotic environment. Two, the 1800s, that specific century in York County, saw the rise of governmental and private citizens taking action for more centralized, organized care. So more oversight meant more consistency, more structure, and more improvements. Finally, number three, today we're actually seeing a push away from institutions. The idea is to reduce the amount of inmates that we have and to reduce the amount of people that are in community homes or in orphanages and putting them back into the community and into individual families.
So now we're going to talk about our next episode. So June 8th, South Central PA Genealogical Society. I'm not going to be there. I'm going to be doing history, fun stuff, unfortunately.
Wait, what? Hold on. I'm going to be doing fun history stuff. You guys, though, are going to be doing...
So Jim is going to play me for the day, and he and Jamie are going to present. So you don't want to miss that, even though I won't be there. It's still going to be great.
Are you reenacting?
Actually, I thought I was going to be reenacting, but I'm helping launch the Children of the American Revolution Society for the Harrisburg area.
You're so I'm gonna say
It's
badass.
just,
Like,
it's
you're
just
so
there's a lot
badass.
happening. But yeah, so if you have a kid that wants to join that, call me. And then June 20th, we're going to be at the Mifflin House.
Yeah, I'm excited about that one.
Pete Mealy.
Yep.
We're super excited.
And so both of them are open to the public. If you're interested in going into the boring day with Dami, or Jim and I, while Dami's out having fun history stuff, you can go onto the York County History Center's website, and then you can order, make reservations for your ticket. Mifflin House, also keep an eye out. We are starting to promote that. So be on the lookout. That's a Saturday, and we heard there's going to be food trucks. It's going to be a really fun event.
Pray for good weather.
Yes, and stay tuned. We are going to have a guest on, Greg Halpin, very soon, talk about his experiences as a police or a fire police chief. Yep. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
See ya.